Hello, everyone. Apologies for being 5 minutes late to whatever is going to happen here. My name is Ryan Erickson. I host the Riffing with Ryan channel on YouTube and here on LinkedIn. Stream to that every once in a while. I do various and sundry things. I don't know what to call myself, but the folks who are here in this room today, they likely do know what to call themselves, and I will call them here up in a moment. The jam session here is on the theme that has been, again, broadcast in the event panel. The event panel is Agile Coaching is Not Life Coaching. And to start that theme, I'd like to invite Nguyen. And you'll get us started off, and after you state the theme and go, I will ask each of the folks around the panel here to introduce themselves, title themselves, and what's their take on the topic based on what we have with the head of the tune.
All right. Thank you. So we'll set up the context here, the domain, the container in which we are inquiring. Welcome everyone. Welcome all you listeners and people on YouTube and on LinkedIn. So this started out as the first initial salvo was originally something that we did, I think, about 2 weeks ago. I had a conversation that Ryan hosted with Marcelo Lopez. And where we're going here is there was a kind of criticism in which we labeled it as a hashtag called no such thing as an Agile coach. And what we mean by that is that there's a current problem with the Agile coach definition, in that it is basically, our premise is that it is insufficient. We see this in terms of the number of the statistics around the success of Agile transformations. We see this in the form of viscerally in the number of layoffs among Agile coaches, Agile staff, Scrum Masters, and so on and so forth. And we question that whether the Agile coaches as an industry or as a profession is clearly delivering the value that it needs to be doing. And our answer is no, and we need to kind of rectify that in some way and at least discuss it and bring it out in the open. Part of the criticism is also that there has been a premature convergence as to the definition of what Agile coaching is, especially in light of the commodification of certifications, right? That it creates a trap in which we have to sell certs, but then we start to codify and define things prematurely when we haven't proven repeatedly. And this is a point that I stress, is that we need to have demonstrable, repeatable results. We need more information to, like, in a way, we reinvent a lot of things that a lot of other domains have figured out, or at least pull some of their wisdom and broaden our research and not assume that we have all the answers. We need to also apply more empiricism, more wisdom making within our profession to also prove to ourselves that what we do is working, right? Rather than put a cert out there and hope and pray that they keep coming, basically. And lastly, what leads to our conversation here is this conversation today around the topic that Agile coaching is not life coaching. And some of us have gone back to some of the old important texts and have said in multiple cases that mistakenly, these authors have said that for an Agile coach to be effective, they have to be some sort of life coach for the team. And so as far as even taking it further, that current definitions of Agile certifications, Agile coaching certifications, rely on the fact that it must comply with like some sort of other body standards that are unrelated to Agile coaching, namely the ICF and their competencies, right? And the first shot I'll take at this is I will stipulate and happy to defend that Agile coach, and then, sorry, there's another side of it is like Marcelo's criticism of the therapization of Agile coaching, right? This thing of overvaluing the individuals and maybe a little bit going down too far of a rabbit hole when you start to talk about people and interactions, okay? That we as Agile coaches have a fiduciary responsibility to the organization. It's fine that we help people feel better and work better, but at the bottom line is, how are we attributing to our clients' bottom line to help them be profitable as a business, okay? And what is the value of an Agile coach? That's up for debate here. Lastly, I think that's about it, actually. So there's this thing about, there's this we're saying that it's a false correlation. I would say I know what it is. The first salvo that I'm firing is that I would say that the dynamic of a professional coach is different than an Agile coach. The arena of the Agile coach is to work with the client through their experience, through whatever they're going through, and help them find their own solutions. However, the problem here is that the professional coach is working with this client's system vicariously. They are going through their dialogue and what's going on with the client as they are living in another world. However, we are different as Agile coaches and Scrum Masters. We live in the system with the client. We are in their structures, and therefore, and our goal is not to always, we have a different set of responsibilities. We have a different agenda than what a professional coaching does, a professional coach does. And that's up for discussion. But I would say they are not the same thing. There is some sort of overlap, which we can explore, but the goals of the two are fundamentally different. And I will leave it at that.
Well said. I've always felt, for example, that an Agile coach is one who has uncovered better ways of developing software, and then they help others to do it. And it's kind of frustrating to me that the definition was hijacked at some point in the past. And I'm glad maybe the gathering of this group indicates that I'm not alone in that thinking. So I'm glad for this meeting. Thanks, Ryan, for putting it together.
Well, you're quite welcome, David. And I'll go through at this point. Thank you for giving us the container, and we'll have, again, each of you introduce yourself, who you are, what do you call yourself, and David, I think you gave a little bit of your take here, but again, we'll keep this brief and crisp up front, and then we'll let it go as soon as we get back around. So, David, you're up.
Oh, I'm up. So I'm David Sabine, and I'm a professional Scrum trainer and a professional Kanban trainer with Scrum.org and ProKanban.org. And over the years, I've hung that shingle that says Agile Coach, and I'm less comfortable nowadays to do that because I no longer know what it means to everyone else in the industry. I'll just stop there. I'm really happy to meet some of you that I've never spoken with yet. So Ryan, again, thanks for bringing this group together.
But just some of us.
Quite welcome. Chris, up to you. Go for it. Chris is unfortunately muted at this point. So,
sorry about
who are
that.
you? Okay, there you go. Who are you? What do you call yourself? What's your take in 30 seconds?
My bad. Technical difficulties there. My name is Chris Vestal. I'm an Agile practitioner and coach. I still haven't shed that title. Maybe I will. But I appreciate this conversation. My focus is mainly on the balance of focus. Have we created an imbalance in the system, and are we focused on the right things always? Just generally focused, but also specifically as it relates to this question of Agile coaching. Are we balancing the role or the perspectives between the technical and the more professional coaching? I have respect for both, right? So I don't know where it lands, and it may be very contextual in the end, but I'm very happy to be part of this conversation to see what we can come up with together.
Thank you, Chris. Damon, here you go.
Oh, okay. Hello, I'm Damon Poole. I am an enterprise Agile coach, at least at the moment. And wrote the book called Professional Coaching for Agilists. And I think there's, in the title there's a little bit of a clue of how I feel about that. Basically, and full disclosure, I teach the ICP ACC, the ICP ATF, and also the training you need for ACC from the International Coaching Federation. So that may make it sound like you know exactly where I stand, but not necessarily. I would actually push back on the, actually, I'm not saying either way, but I would push back on there's any single cause for, you know, the trouble that was described. I'm not so sure that it's trouble with Agile coaching. I think actually people are worn out with Agile, right? That, you know, what we think of as Agile, you know, you and I can converse with people and help them understand, but actually I don't think our voices are really heard anymore. I think that's the voices of coworkers that have never actually been on a real Agile team. And to me, that's the real problem that we're dealing with in the Agile community. Just a quick thing on professional coaching. I teach how to be a professional coach. I don't think in the Agile world you want to go to somebody like Coactive, wonderful folks, but it's exactly what was said by somebody. They're going to teach you how to be a vicarious coach. I teach how to utilize and leverage professional coaching as an Agile coach. You're not going to be a professional coach. You're going to use professional coaching. If you try to be a life coach for, you know, as an Agile coach, I don't think that's going to work.
Okay. And we'll all get a chance to hop in and whatever flames up for each of you on that topic. And thank you so much, Damon, for giving us that background. Erica.
Hello. Can you hear me all right?
You are audible.
Okay, good. So I'm Erica Lenz. I have been some flavor of Agile coach for over a decade. So I find this conversation very interesting because it's something I struggled with personally as I've grown as a coach. Like, where's that line between being an Agile coach and dealing with people problems, perhaps using some of the skills that you can find in professional coaching, perhaps not. I think there's a huge difference between Agile coaches and professional coaches because they have different clients. So your allegiance is different. And I think that drives pretty much everything else. That said, most of the impediments to Agile transformation are people problems. So I think that's where, at least that's my take on where this life coaching, as we're calling it, stuff came from, is over the decades that we've been trying to do Agile, we have run into lots of people problems and we need some skills to do so. So I'm interested in this conversation from that standpoint.
Thank you, Erica. Mark. That's you.
Yes, sorry, I just wanted to unmute. Yes, so who am I? The short answer is human. Doesn't say anything. But I've worked in a multitude of roles for many, many years. You can see my gray hair. Somebody mentioned software development. I definitely think that when we talk about Agile, it probably has to do with something IT-ish. And I consider myself a practitioner first and foremost. What do I call myself? Mark. And what's my take? I listened to what you just said. As an intro, I would agree with a lot of it. I have a big beef with dogma in general, and I see a lot of method wars where people are saying stupid things like Kanban is better or more agile than Scrum or whatever, stuff like that. A lot of that, and that's just like BS to me. I don't get it whatsoever. And I should also say I have a ton of slightly odd certifications, and I'm certified to certify others in SAFe as an example. That doesn't mean that I love everything in SAFe. I definitely don't. But anyway, all the method wars is nonsensical. So I would actually tend to agree with what you said in the start. An Agile coach definitely needs to help organizations be profitable. And the last thing is, I agree to it's not some things are people problems. It's all problems are people problems.
All right.
Yeah.
Michael,
Hello, you can hear me all right?
I can hear you.
Cool. So yeah, hey everyone, I'm Mike. Helping teams for about 9 years, usually called Scrum Master or Agile Coach. Nowadays, I use Agile Thought Provoker. I don't know if that just sounds lame or not, but I go with it. Yeah, well, the thing I guess you might know me for, right? The thing that I spend a lot of time talking about on the internet these days is dysfunction mapping, which is, I guess, my little attempt to make inroads in this problem. And the reason that it's something I'm passionate about is because I think as an industry, as a community, let's say, we've done a really poor job of demonstrating our value. And I think, I actually think it's a really deeply immoral thing to tell someone that they should not care about their value proposition in a company and how much, their return on investment is when they're hired, because that's the thing that leads to that person being laid off ultimately, right? And so I think as an industry, we need to do a much better job of giving people those tools to show the actual impact that they have. And I've obviously got some very deep thoughts about how we've gotten to where we have, but I think how it relates to this coaching problem is that in the absence of a reliable way to actually check for competence, we revert to purity testing, we revert to language, we revert to framework wars, right? We revert to ways of trying to tribalistically sort people into groups because we can't actually check to see if they're capable of achieving outcomes, which is the thing I think we need to get better at.
Thank you, Mike. Dan. Oh, audio. Are you on audio, Dan? Do we have you?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Well,
yes,
you can
Verizon,
hear me, but
yes.
my lips and word and my audio may be not synced because I had to change source. But I'm Dan Moody. I've been coaching for Agile coaching for a little over a decade. I agree with a lot of what I've heard. So for me, there's been my own personal journey of coming in as an expert of I know how to do all this stuff and then figuring out that didn't work very well because it upsets people. And so you have to figure out how to deal with people and you have to figure out how people change. And so all the comments around these are people problems. I think that has been my experience is that the things that hold people back aren't the doing, whatever the framework or the thing is. Those things are actually not too hard at the end of the day. What's hard is when people have to work with other people and trying to figure that piece out. And so helping people through that and helping people figure out how to work together in a way that gets to the right outcome is, I find, what really matters. And so is that coaching? Is it not? Professional coaching is not? I don't know. But maybe it's best just not to name it. So I don't know where I stand on that and the whole life coach, professional coach. I'm agreeing with a lot of what I've heard. I agree with how it was framed up. And so I think there's a lot of agreement with where we are.
Thanks, Dan. All right. So you don't get to do this again. So you get that. Rules of the game. I'm an open space nerd. We have some principles. Whoever comes is the right people. That is these folks and you who are on LinkedIn typing furiously away. I'll put some chat up here at some point. Whatever happens is the only thing that could have happened in this place. So if there's conflict, if there's confusion, that's going to happen. And that's what's supposed to happen when human beings get together and are honest with integrity and respect. Whenever it starts at the right time, I think we said that. We are here. We are now a couple minutes late. Hey, when it is over, it's over. That could mean, if we all agree in 2 minutes, we'll say, hi, the world is solved. We're going to check out. Or if after whatever at the top of the hour, I don't have an end time on this. So if there's live conversation at the end, it will go as long as the folks here in the room want to take it. Wherever it happens is the right place. That is here. And the one law of open space technology is the law of mobility. If you feel that you are neither contributing nor learning from the discussion that is happening, you are compelled, I compel you, that open space, the laws of open space compel you to get out. Go somewhere else where you are contributing, whether that is with someone else in the room that we have on Wheelo set up for you, or whether that's just, hey, I'm out, goodbye. With that, the marketplace has been set. We have the topic here, and I'll do the open space facilitator thing and be completely present, totally invisible, and let what happens happen.
So I'm feeling a little disappointed at all this agreement and alignment because I was hoping this would be a lively conversation, but now I'm like, well, what do we have to fight about?
Yeah, I agree. And when I first, more agreement, but when I think it's sort of like the no estimates thing, the no such thing as an agile coach, I think is a misnomer. Like I understood it to mean something completely different than what it was, the way you framed it up. So sort of like no estimates, I'm like, that's crazy. And then I understood what it actually was. I'm like, oh, they're not actually talking about not estimating things. They're just talking about doing it a different way. So anyway, that's my thing. Is I thought the hashtag it's a misnomer. I agree with what is in that.
Just as a side note, if you want to talk about that somewhere else, I literally believe in no estimates, not different estimating, no estimates. So if you want to have a sidebar on that at some point, I'd be happy to have it with you.
So
Count me in. I'd like to stir that pot too.
So I'm wondering if there's not some controversy to dig for here around. So I think I said this in my introduction. The difference between a professional coach and an agile coach is who your client is, who's paying you, who are you in service to. And the professional coach is in service to the person sitting in front of them, and the agile coach is not. And so one of the big problems I've had over the years is agile coaches going in and saying, well, I'm going to help this person develop, right? If you want to do that from an ethical stance, you have to be following their lead, and maybe they're developing in a way that is not in service to your corporate client. So that's been one of the conflicts I've seen. And I just start talking about it directly with people. Like, hey, I'm hired by your company or your boss, which means that if you're wanting to grow in a direction that's out of alignment with what they want, I'm in a funky position.
So if I might take a flyer on that, I think something I said earlier, which I'll just reiterate here, is I would not recommend that any agile coach go and take training from Coactive. But bear with me. There's 2,000 trainers of ICF accredited trainers out there, me being one of them. So obviously I'm saying take it from me. But there are now 6, myself included, and 5 others that are specifically helping you understand how to apply the concepts of professional coaching within an agile environment. And for all the reasons that you gave, if you try to be a professional coach, all the stuff you said, but there's a lot to apply from professional coaching. There's a lot of lessons learned. A simple one is we as agile coaches very often stomp on people's choices unintentionally. So somebody says, just a simple example, somebody comes to you and says, oh, I'm having a big problem with the product owner, and actually the scrum master is bothering me, and our stand-ups are terrible. And so then an agile coach might say, oh, tell me more about your stand-ups. But they mentioned 2 other things, and maybe they don't want to talk about any of them. So asking something like, okay, well, what would you like to talk about today? Then puts the choice back on them, as opposed to, we took it over. And professional coach training can definitely help people with seeing that and understanding that.
So let me jump in here and kind of attempt to raise the difficulty level a little bit, because we're all in agreement. It's too easy. I love to stir. I'm a bassist. I got to create tension in the group, right? So, and before I start, there's one side I forgot to introduce myself. So my name is Nguyen. Can't lose with a name like that. I'm a product coach, enterprise coach. I am a life coach. In addition, I am trained. I have clients, and I have done life coaching in the office, in the arena. Okay, so I think so. And then the other, I have many hobbies. I was a dev for I was a long time dev, so I straddled that world as well. So let me attempt to now raise the difficulty, right? So if we are all in agreement that Agile coaching is not life coaching, and kind of let's go deeper into what Damon just pulled on, right? It's like, what is the role of life coaching or professional coaching? We're using them synonymously at this point. And, is it, some people call it a magic pixel dust. Other people call it, there's going to be other people who say like, hey, it's essential. You can't do this. And I think we need to also value that viewpoint of why certain people say, hey, life coaching is so critical. And historically, let's be honest here, right? There's a lot of coaches out there who go out into the field working with clients, and they stamp all over their own personal brand, their team brand, right? Because they don't have either diplomacy skills. You get taught listening skills in a coaching program, right? So going to kind of like, I'm a fan already of what Damon's been talking about, like how do I apply life coaching to the Agile arena? But there's more than that too. And then there's areas where life coaching utterly fails, which is what Marcelo and I were discussing in the previous call. That what do you do about bad actors? There are false assumptions. Is meeting them where they are always right? Right? Things like that. There are certain memes out there coming from the life coaching world. Sometimes true, sometimes not, right? And what are people's thoughts on that?
So I'd love to maybe jump in on that if that's all right, because I think one of the things that really worries me, and I'm going to deliberately put this in a maybe more incendiary way because it'll be more fun for the discussion. But I think by and large, most Agile coaches are not competent, and I say the same thing about Scrum Masters often as well. And I think that is evidenced by what's going on in the job market right now. It's evidenced by the general perception of coaches of Agile roles in general. And I think we're actually falling into that very trap here with this conversation. Is we are talking about the theory of different kinds of coaching. Almost, we haven't completely done this, but we're almost talking about that absent the outcome that we're actually trying to achieve. And I think that's exactly where we end up being seen as superfluous in an organization, right? Which is to say, have we actually made a visible, measurable difference to the team, to the organization, whatever, to repeat what Erica said, right? It depends on who we're there to serve. That is going to vary. But regardless of who we're there to serve or the context that we're there for, it is to achieve a valuable monetary outcome because we're being paid to do a job that has to follow. And I think if we don't talk about any of these things, and that's whether it's this stance of coaching, this kind of coaching, whatever kind of spin we're putting on it, and I very much agree with the idea of these are tools that we will pull in various contexts, but that has to be tied to what is the way that we're actually measuring the value that delivers and what outcome does that achieve, which I think is just often completely lost.
Can I say something on this? Because I agree with what you're saying here. So I just mentioned the method war before. There is a show called Faulty Towers in which one of the guys, he says, "Don't mention the war." I think that's pretty good advice. Don't mention the methodology or the whatever. Nobody cares. At least not the ones who are in charge of P&L. They don't care. I mean, if you run around saying save this, save that, or scrum this, scrum that, or Kanban this, Kanban that, they will definitely not listen. And that's not what you're getting paid to implement Scrum or Save or Kanban or whatever. Those are tools to deliver on the outcome that you're talking about.
So, but that's a natural stage that, young Agilists or early career Agilists, because I wasn't young when I started in Agile, that's a natural stage that people go through. And so as we're talking about how do we choreograph growing coaches in the community, we have to have a little bit of tolerance for that stuff. It's obnoxious, but I remember when I was like that.
It's interesting to see the exact same discussion we may have had 10 or 15 years ago coming up as though, oh, I just thought of this. It's pretty funny. Actually, I want to pull in the words fiduciary and results and all those things. And I want to go in a slightly different direction because I think there's a problem there. Fiduciary responsibility, if you look at it, from a certain perspective, is we're gonna pick products that we think are gonna make more money. Look at the bottom. Are we taking this money and investing it and getting a good return? But what is a good return with Agile? I have my opinion, but I don't think there's a clear consensus on that, right? So you bring in an Agile coach. Can you show that revenue's increased? I would love to see that. I don't know that you can, because was the Agile coach listened to? Was there an effect on this team where they're more agile, but what the business is giving them is the same requirements from a year ago that nobody cares about anymore? Now, how do we have that connection? Just having a definition of what agile is and what a good outcome is for being more agile, I don't think actually that's well defined. And I'm not blaming the Agile community. I'm not. If you just look at financial fluency within IT is very low. I remember, just very quickly, I remember talking to a CIO once, which was just before I decided to exit Agile for a while. And I was saying, hey, this is great. You got a $50 million budget. You're making $5 billion. Think of how much more money you can make. And he said, I don't think you really understand how this works. We're trying to reduce our cost over here. I don't know why you're talking about our revenues. We're making plenty of money. That's not an issue. Oh, okay. All right. So, what are we even measuring? What do we mean by Agile? How do we know that we're getting good results?
Okay, I'm frustrated a little because Erica said earlier that we're all in agreement, and then it seems we've diverged a bit. I'm worried that we're having this conversation and I'm not becoming clearer about what an Agile coach is. And I'm getting confused. And actually, I'd like to tell the first time that I think I was confused about what an Agile coach was like in 2012. I remember going to a 3-day coaching retreat in Toronto. It was featuring Lissa Adkins and Michael Spade. And mad respect for their careers. They've done good work. But in the class, Lissa had been explaining the Agile coach stance, okay? And many of you will be familiar with this idea that a coach is sometimes a mirror to reflect the coachee's context, or a coach uses powerful questions, and a coach is non-biased, and they are a neutral observer, and that they have no agenda. And then one of the participants asked Lissa, so why the descriptor? Why Agile coach? Why not just coach? And the question implies, like, if a basketball coach teaches basketball and a fitness coach is a hard ass in the gym and runs your exercises, and why would not an Agile coach teach Agile software development practices? And rather than lean into that idea and say, yeah, an Agile coach teaches Agile engineering practices and exercises the team, based on Lissa's body language in that moment, it was pretty clear that she was going to go another way, and it was clear that we were not to ask such a question. We were supposed to ignore the cognitive dissonance there and just accept the next thing that she was about to say. And what she said was something like, an Agile coach is a person who uses their experience with Agile methods to facilitate the coach and coachee relationship. And they should remain neutral and without agenda. And I'd like to hear your opinions about this, but that never sat well with me.
Yeah, I mean, can I just say that I think that's just outright wrong? Is that going too far? And again, I think it's
outright wrong in your opinion, but it's also very common.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem, right? It's the reason I'm saying it's wrong is because of the way it's framed as if it's a truth, right? I think the conception of a certain kind of coaching where you behave in that way is absolutely valid and is a tool to be used, but there are contexts in which that isn't valid. And I think you use the fitness coach example, which is the one I always like to lean on, because I think it's the closest to what we actually do, right? If I'm about to hurt myself because my form is poor, I want my fitness coach to tell me and not just say, oh, what do you think's going on there, as I fall over and break my back, which is the thing that a lot of Agile teams today are kind of being left to. So I think it comes back to this problem, which I can't remember who it was that said this earlier. I think it might have been Mark, which is that the problem isn't necessarily that there is or should be a single correct conception of what coaching is. The problem is when someone tries to make their version of it the correct conception. I think, like with all things, a natural tension between different ways of thinking about problems is healthy. And I think the reason that this conversation is coming up is because our industry has gone far too much down a certain path, and we've started to not realize that there are different views of this that should be naturally interplaying against each other.
So I want to be fair to
controversy.
Lissa. That coaching framework, that coaching stance is about being in a different position in that coaching framework. And so it's not just about how you described coaching. Sometimes you are firmly in teaching. Sometimes you are firmly in mentoring. Sometimes at the bottom of that framework, you are firmly in the Agile practices, whatever those are. I mean, the thousands and thousands of things that fall under that category. And sometimes you move into professional coaching because it's appropriate in the moment. And sometimes you move into professional facilitation. And it's interesting to me that we're not talking about that at all, because that's a fundamental skill that's useful for Agile coaches to have. Maybe not all of them. Technical coaches maybe don't need that skill. But I think I have found that framework profoundly useful as I've tried to figure out what animal I was. So I want to make sure that we're talking about that accurately. And
what about it was not accurate that I said?
You were talking about having no bias. And so if you're teaching, you have a bias. If you're mentoring, you have a bias, for sure, and an agenda. And so for me, those are the parts of the framework where I get to have an opinion. And in fact,
Erica, sorry. So Lissa was then incorrect
I think you might have seen
response
her
to the
at
question?
a moment in her development. I think I may have encountered the framework later than you did. I don't know what year that was, but when I learned it from her, it was a very different kind of conversation.
So I teach this now. I can explain it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But Christopher had his hand up first, so let's go with Christopher.
Well, what I was going to bring up is the definition of Agile coach. If there is a third perspective that I don't think is represented best here. Like, we're kind of on the same common ground, seems like. But if you look at some of the conversations that were happening on LinkedIn over the weekend, on one of my posts, someone took to that third perspective, which is the professional coaching is the most important. You can get by being an Agile coach without actually understanding Agile to a degree. And because you don't need that knowledge, right? That's what they're asserting. People are asserting that out there. And so I would ask, kind of reflecting back to this group, what do you think about that? And what are we going to do about it?
I think that's crazy.
Yeah.
Right. So if we are, to Erica's point, right? I agree with you, Erica. Like, a coach is a teacher. It's a trainer. It's a facilitator. We have to bring all those skills to bear in order to really render the value and bring that value, surface that value. But if your focus is so much on coaching, if that is 90% of the focus, and there's a lot of great tools out there, I won't call them out by names, but that have more of that balanced view, but it still seems like the center of all of it is still professional coaching. And I love professional coaching. I love all of it. It's helped me personally. Some of the most respected people in my circle are like you, Damon, and Art Pittman. I don't mean to pull names and drop names, but these are like real coaches to me, and real, they're my heroes. Like, I've seen them in action in real life. So I don't dispute the value, if you will, of professional coaching, both as a stance in a limited way, also as just a professional development, as a Agilist, I appreciate that. I want to go deeper there personally. It brings out the best in me if I'm investing in that way in myself. But there is that third perspective, and I again center back on that. Like if you don't have the requisite experience and the perspectives that come from that experience within Agile, how can you call yourself an Agile coach? You can call yourself a coach, but if you don't have that Agile in front of it, I don't know what where we need to land on that, and that's one of the
Well,
things I wanted to discuss today.
I actually have to go in 10 minutes. So just
Okay.
to circle back on the ICP-ACC, leaving Lisa out of it for a moment. Yes, it is important to, and bear with me, this is a two-parter. It is important to not have bias and not have an agenda. But that's on the things where they should be making the choice, not in general, right? If you don't have the agenda of I'm trying to help the organization bring about more agility, you're not going to be there for very long. But the no bias, no agenda is not me saying that you should do Scrum. Me saying, here's what Scrum looks like. Here's what Kanban looks like. Here's how you might mix them. What would you like to do? That's what you'd like to do? Okay, cool. By the way, you're holding the hammer by the wrong end. Right? So I'm not biased or have an agenda as far as the kinds of decisions that they should be making. And one sort of crossover here, I think, one of the things I've sort of come to is without your corporate sponsor helping you out, you're not going to be very successful because, why do they have to listen to you, right? Even if you're pointing and saying you're doing it wrong, they'll be just like, okay, I'll wait for this jerk to leave. But if your corporate sponsor understands, I'm going to be more successful if you help them understand they need to do something here. They don't need to necessarily do everything I'm suggesting. They need to do something here. It's like, hey, kids, you don't have to have broccoli, but you have to have some kind of green vegetable, right? You need something like that. Otherwise, no matter how non-professional coaching we are, they're not going to do anything anyway, right? They'll just humor us. So there's a thought.
So to follow that, and I kind of attempt to tie it back to what you presented earlier, Damon, there's an aspect here that is also problematic because I think if you think historically, Agile in itself was not producing, and the Agile industry was not producing enough coaches to meet demand. Therefore, there was value in creating these certifications. However, the other side that came with it, and it's maybe a problem, I would argue it creates a problem, is that when they go and when they say anybody can be an Agile coach, you do not know how the sport is played. And I would actually posit that there is actual sport here. It's called helping run a successful business. And part of that game is product development, product management, execution, delivery, release management, learning, all of those things. Even sometimes reaching into almost borderline HR issues, right? Because we have to look at the agent working inside the arena, meaning the teams working in their environment. So in essence, kind of like, I believe that in a way, product management, life coaching has become a sort of Trojan horse for others outside of the product development community to infiltrate into our domain and basically, in a way by declaring that, hey, I don't need to have technical experience. I don't need to have delivery experience to sit on a team and help them with what they need to do. I would say, yeah, that happens. There are certain people that are out there, but they are in a way a one-trick pony. Their breadth is limited. And when they get into wicked problems, I question whether they can solve it without prior experience.
I want to one-up you here.
Yeah.
I want to double down on that. So okay. Technical, we had a whole sidebar on that. Technical, absolutely interesting. But I would say actually, it's not so much the technical. It's has the person been on an actual Agile team ever? You cannot understand Agile or describe Agile without having had that experience. I've run into, lots of wonderful coaches, but too many coaches that will argue that we can't have a cross-functional team, and they believe it. They don't see the value in it. I'm like, what? I'm sorry. Why do you think Agile is valuable? Right? Or that work is too big to be broken down into small things. I mean, it's not, we live in the real world. It's not realistic to have a release every 2 weeks. Really? What? Who are you? So, oh, wow. Okay. I didn't mean to go that far. But to me, without that experience, I don't know how you can lead people to that.
And I'll one up that
Well
even
said.
further, right?
Well said and agreed, by the
Yeah,
way, Damon.
there's a side here that even just sitting on much less a delivery team, much less a high performing team. How many people have actually seen and felt and been inside a high performing team for real? So,
Actually, everybody has. That's a sidebar. But thinking you can do it on a regular basis and knowing how to do it on a regular basis and having been on one that was using Agile, that's different.
So I'd like to add to that as well, because I think one of the things that goes annoyingly unsaid or unagreed upon is that this is a software problem as well. And the reason this one frustrates me is because I've actually had this conversation with other coaches, and in one breath, they'll say that famous quote of every business is a software business, right? Even banks, they're just software businesses with banking licenses. And then, a moment later, they're saying that actually you don't need to have technical knowledge, or you don't need to understand how software teams work because Agile is bigger than software. But nothing is bigger than software. Software is the biggest thing that there is, right? It's the reason that we're all doing all of these things. And ultimately, it all comes down to software. And while I'm not going to take the full absolutist stance that, you have to have written code to be doing any kind of related work, I think that a lot of the time it's a reluctance to understand the basics of software development that leads people to these kind of strange, often self-protecting opinions where they have to kind of justify that they haven't taken that time, when realistically we all know that software is at the core of this. And like you say, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to have been a person that has been, a software engineer in your past, but being part of a software team, if you're going to coach software teams, seems to me like an obvious thing that has to be true.
I 100% agree with this, and I'm a largely non-technical coach. Lightly technical, but I have spent most of my career, in the early part of my career, I was super insecure about that. And so I did a lot of making up for it and asking people to explain to me what the heck was going on. And I know enough now that I can talk software honestly and with some depth. But we forget about the technical practices. So what I know I cannot coach is the deep technical practices that underlie any successful Agile implementation. But I know where my line is, and I seek out pairs of very technical people so that I can bring what I bring to the table, which is pretty good people skills.
So one thing that kind of was driving me crazy, again, we're on LinkedIn when this happened, was the notion that technical scrum masters are actually detrimental, meaning the technical experiences that they bring with them, that's a part of them, right? That's detrimental. And it's much better not to have any technical experience at all. That way there's no bias, there's no rushing to help the team and tell them or help them out in any way that they need to fix their own problems. Well, some of that, there is truth to some of that, right? We all recognize that. But I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on that assertion by some that technical scrum masters are actually detrimental? And by extension, you're growing scrum masters into coaches. That's how this should probably work, right? So I'm just curious, what does this panel consider appropriate there?
I think
I
there's
would
a
consider
difference
it
between domain technical expertise and technical expertise. Like if you're trying to be a successful scrum master and also completely understand exactly what they're doing, that may not be the best idea.
Right. I would say it's a false tautology.
Maybe.
Just because I just saw there was a comment that showed up that said just because I do software dev, I do not understand business is a false logical statement. I do dev, I understand business. Yep. They are two separate domains, right?
Yes. Yes. While just because you knew software development, you don't necessarily know business. That's also true.
But I'm saying I know either you know one domain or you don't. Right? They're separate domains.
Yeah, and so to that point, I think the bit that is important to keep in mind in terms of the people that we're, I think, trying to reach with this, right, is not that you must have all of the knowledge right now, or that you must implicitly understand everything. It's that you must not make excuses for the skill gaps that you have, and you must seek to plug them. And I think that's exactly what Erica was getting at, because to reiterate, I'm the same, right? I'm not a deeply technical person. I was a business analyst in my early days. I was in software support, right? I was not an engineer. But probably imposter syndrome, right? It leads us to maybe, try and understand these things. And I think for me, that's where the bit I mentioned earlier comes into play, which is I've got no problem with a coach saying, in this context, in this domain, I don't need to have this technical acumen to solve this problem. What I personally can't accept is someone saying, I will never need that technical acumen, and to say that I would ever need that technical acumen is an attack on me, which I'm taking it to the extreme, but is sometimes the way that conversation feels like it goes.
Well,
I personally agree a lot with what you're saying here, because I think that if you need to help anyone, it does help that you have that you know the domain, right? So I think in general, agile coaching is definitely in the software context. Else we wouldn't set agile in front of it, I would say.
I agree.
I have
would
to
say,
go. I just want to say thanks to everybody, and next time let's try to get together with some beer or wine or something like that.
That'd be
Sounds
awesome.
good.
Bourbon.
So
Bye-bye.
one thing.
Thanks for coming, Damon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
The way I kind of frame this goes back to the notion of be and do, but it's an interrelationship there. You can't have one without the other. So if you've never been or never done agile, how can you be agile like that? Not to get all philosophical with this, but it's a feedback loop there, right? It's a positive reinforcing loop. The more you do, the more you become, and the more you become, the more you can do. So it's a facilitating thing there. And again, not to get overly philosophical with it, but I sense that this imbalance is more around not really being agile or doing agile. It's about being coach and doing coaching. So going back to the preface there, like where is that balance? And it's probably super contextual. It is to an extent what each individual organization needs from this individual person. It could be at that level, but we're spending so much time and focus and effort and energies and emotion, right? Trying to propel ourselves into these levels of professional coaching. When does that become a waste? When does that, from a lean perspective, when does that become just motion?
So I think with what I've seen anyway is a few years ago there was this big push among the coaches that I respected the most who started going to things like ORSC or coactive, and I know that I think it was Damon that was saying don't do coactive, but I've seen coaches go through this. At the time I looked at that, right, and I thought, who are all these hokey people doing all this like weird stuff? And now they're doing all these weird, like out there seance-y, like hippie dippy type things. And these people are strange and they're almost doing therapy. And I've literally seen cases where someone who is going through coaching, they go into a room with someone one-on-one and the person comes out in tears because they got into some conversation about postpartum depression. And it's like, what do you do? Like, why are we having these conversations at work? And I set it to the back of like, I poo-pooed it. Like, nope, this is crazy. But I will say the coaches that I have found are the single most effective coaches that I know, agile coaches, possess this skill of professional coaching. To the points earlier, I think it's important to be, and to some of the comments that I've seen, it's important to be clear when you're in what stance. And if you're going to do coaching, you need agreement. That's part of the ICF and just as a general good practice, the person you're coaching has to agree, I want to be coached by you. And that's a joint thing. That's an agreement, right? So, and I think that skill is very important.
Well, Dan, can I ask you then,
yeah,
do you have to have and Erica said this earlier, and I really appreciated her position on this, that your client, do you need agreement with your client that you're going to delve into the realms of professional coaching? And I want to challenge this idea that an agile coach is all things to all people. People have said in this conversation that an agile coach will sometimes be involved in HR issues, and they'll sometimes be a professional coach, and I wonder, maybe that's the error that has been made. If I'm hired as an agile coach, I want to teach agile engineering practices and improve share software development patterns, and if there's a issue related that I think needs therapy, that word has come up, needs life coaching or professional coaching, maybe I should advise that they seek a professional coach.
But see, I think but hang on, there's someone. I think the point is though that you need to have that skill, because in working with people through change, you are going to encounter people issues. And like I said, the people who I've seen are the single most effective agile coaches that I know have that ability to do it.
I agree that it's important to have that ability to do it, but and maybe you've already said the point. But people aren't being clear enough about when they're taking that stance.
That's right.
Right.
So,
I think that's. But hang on. I keep getting interrupted before I finish my point. So the point. So you, I think you need to be clear. Yes, clear about when you're in that thing. What does that sound?
That's Erica.
I did that?
Leave. No. You have to leave though.
No, that's the referee. That's the referee's bell.
No, you'd mentioned the chat. I'm sorry.
But this is too good, and I haven't really. Yeah. But I want Dan to finish. Yeah, let Dan finish.
I've kind of lost where I was, but I think you need to be clear about where you are. I think you need the different skills of. To Erica's point, I think that the old X-wing that I think Accenture bought and then killed, and it still exists. You just can go find it. I think it was Michael Spade and Lisa and others. But professional coaching is a stance, and it is something that you do when the time is appropriate with agreement. I have done it with individuals, and I've gotten the client's agreement to do it. But I don't think you're diving into HR issues. There was a point here about goals, right? I think it wasn't Michael Lloyd who was saying, in furtherance of the goal, I'm going to engage with you in this way because it helps us get there. I'm not going to engage with you in this way because this is what's going to solve some HR issue that's completely not germane to what I'm here to do. I'm using it as a tool because it helps achieve the goal and solve the problem that you brought me in to solve. So I'll pause there, and I know Erica's got stuff to say.
So my mama is a psychotherapist. This requires a master's degree. And she and I have talked a lot about coaching and therapy and the difference between the two. It is unethical for anybody without a degree and practicum and supervision to do therapy. I really, if nothing else comes out of this conversation, I would hope that no one in the Agile community uses the word therapy again, because you are not qualified. And it's because therapy gets into some pretty deep personal stuff, and you can actually do damage even if you're coming in with the best of intent. So I'm all fired up about that. I will fight with anybody about that all day.
You don't need to.
Yeah.
So I would love to add to that though, Erica, because I think that actually hits to the heart of that kind of ties a bunch of this together, which is to say, so let's say that therapist is not one of the stances, but what there are these different methods by which we might help people to achieve their goals, whatever it is. We've kind of gone around a bunch of that, but the thing that strikes me is that the chances of any one individual being a master of all those stances is very, very low. The Dunning-Kruger effect is very real, as I'm sure we've all experienced, both ourselves and with other people. And I think maybe to me this gets back to kind of what David was saying, which is that if I'm a technical coach and I want to work on engineering practices, that's my area of expertise. I can maybe spend some time on that, and I think that that's not where I tend to spend most of my time. In fact, I spend most of my time on facilitation, which I would say is probably the easiest of the stances, if such a thing could be said. So, maybe that means that I'm not as good as a coach. But the point is, I'm aware of where my strengths are, and I spend my time on that. And I think the problem, or the anti-pattern that I see a lot, is that we try to be masters of all of those stances, and we don't want to admit that we're not, which is what leads us to operating outside of our ability and then creating a lot of negative consequences. I think if we were more willing to understand that, yes, an Agile coach can do all of these things, but that an individual Agile coach isn't necessarily expected to be a master of all of them, that would probably make us a little bit more open and honest about, where we're spending our time and the things that we're achieving.
Right.
Yeah,
I definitely agree to what you're saying here.
I was going to say that, Michael,
I do have
what you're saying about you and really enjoying facilitation, right? That's something that you enjoy. That's why you're good at it, I would say, right? Now, somebody else might be great with coaching, right? That's what they're naturally drawn to. So they're automatically great at it. But that goes back to the point maybe of, okay, there is a hierarchy, right? In order to progress your career, you kind of start out at facilitation, but, is that where you get stuck if that's what your natural inclinations and abilities are? Why is it that that coaches that maybe they're just better with people? Why is that the natural progression of things? Seems like within organizations.
But why are those activities gathered under the term agile coach? Like if you're good at facilitation, advertise yourself as a facilitator. If your goal is to help business to develop, then advertise yourself as a business coach. Why the word agile coach?
Right.
So I'm with you, Dave.
So
You've been trying to get in, so you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So this goes back directly to the value. This is where I'm criticizing certain maturity models. I'm criticizing certain growth models, and so on and so forth. Because you can even the X-wing itself, right? You can say, I've got these categories of specialization skills I need to develop, but what these models don't do, and this is a fundamental problem and that needs to be addressed, is that how does that particular component or part or compartment of that model drive business value, drives business success? And going directly back to what Michael is pointing at is that there's a disconnect because those models are dysfunctional, right? We need to. I responded to somebody last night on a LinkedIn comment. I said we have to be emphatic and very apparent about to address Damon's parting question shot to us, right? Yeah. That whatever we do as agile coaches must be somehow traceable and attributable to the bottom line.
Yep.
Even if it's professional coaching, as you say, hey, I'm going to help unblock a personal problem between a person and their environment, or a person between some conflict between a number of people, right? That involves decision making around product delivery, for instance, right? I'm removing an impediment. That's job number one. So that is the question that we need to really fundamentally wrestle with. It's the point. Now, plot twist. I'm going to throw another one out there. In defense of, now I know I was against it, but in defense of life coaching, professional coaching, I would argue we are also having another dysfunction amongst agile coaches, that in a certain way, the coach as a person needs the life coach more than they need to coach themselves. Plot twist, right? Because if I get in there and I am pushing jargon and trying to be smarter than one up my audience, and I can't sell well, I would argue there's a stance in every agile coaching wheel, whatever you call it. Selling is a critical skill. Critical, maybe even more important than all of them combined. Because if
selling or influence,
if you
cannot
sell change, you cannot make a difference.
I want to hop in for just a second. Jess Brock has joined. Jess was in our conversation and she was invited here. Jess, are you on audio? Can we hear you even though you look like a black box to us?
Can't hear.
Oh, unfortunately. Okay. Well, we continue.
Oh, I just
okay. I want to challenge.
And let's play.
So I want to challenge this idea a bit because I don't know when. I understand how agile coaching becomes related to change, organizational change. But what if we just treat those things as separate and say, like, an agile coach is someone who has uncovered better ways to develop software, and they help others to do that. And the issue of change is perhaps a different realm. And by the way, I think people change quite easily. We change all the time. We go through change daily. This idea that change is really, really difficult is kind of well, distracting sometimes. But I mean, I can appreciate it's difficult.
So,
but that could be considered a separate matter from agile coaching.
So I would like to jump on that, because I think this ties very heavily to the work I'm doing, right? And this is a big part of what I'm trying to focus on, is getting people to create meaningful change. And I think that maybe is the bit, I don't know, maybe if I'm misunderstanding, David, but the change is inevitable, right? And I think I actually weirdly got in a lot of trouble for saying this on LinkedIn recently, that when you hire me, I guarantee change. And there were some people that thought that was an unrealistic thing to say. And I was shocked, because I thought that was the one thing that I could guarantee. You know, the question is it going to be changed for the better? Is it going to be changed in the direction that you want? Those are the questions that you might want to ask. But I think that's the part that matters. And to talk about your separation between agile coaching and change is, well, yes, agile coaches help people to uncover better ways of building software products, let's say. The system that they are in holistically is going to have a number of choke points, bottlenecks, whatever you want to call it, that are going to impede their ability to move in a united fashion in the same direction that they want to move. And so I think if you don't consider that system, that change is going to, it's a Sisyphus problem, right? It's going to roll back down the hill if you don't also consider the other factors. So for me, I get what you're saying, but I think unless I'm misunderstanding, the bit that it misses is that it is very, very easy to make a small change in a complex system. It is very, very hard to make sure that changes don't undo each other over time if we're not considering the whole. And I think that's the part that ties the agile coaching at the kind of product engineering level to the change agent system thinking level, if that makes sense.
Well, let me bring in a real
I
example.
want to just hop in for a moment and welcome our new participant, Jess Brock. If you want to say a moment about you, your name, what you call yourself, and your take on what you have heard so far.
Oh, sure. I've only heard a snippet. I'm Jess Brock. I'm pretty passionate about dojo coaching. I saw the original post by Chris, and I see a lot of value in having that empirical experience. I am a dojo coach, so we get down in the trenches and intersect, learn by doing. So of course I'm biased that a coach would have a familiarity in what they're coaching.
Yeah. Well, back to regular schedule programming, Ryan. All right. So the 2.1, before I forget it, because I've thought it several times and not said it, is I have not seen this influx of life coaches who have no experience with software development being agile coaches. I have not experienced it. So if it's happening, I haven't seen it. I've seen the reverse. I've seen agile coaches I've seen people who are experienced with agile practices in software development gain the coaching knowledge and come back and lean heavily on it. But I haven't seen people without those skills coming in. But let me give a tangible in terms of why change is important, why coaching is important, and to the point of value. So let's say, as an example, a client says, what I want you to do is I want you to put in a portfolio, right? I want you to help us with portfolio management. And you find out that the problem isn't that they don't have a portfolio, it's that nobody on the team talks to each other. And that even if you put in the most flawless, beautiful portfolio process in the world, it's going to fail because these people cannot work together. That is their problem. The problem has nothing to do with whether or not they have a portfolio. It's everything to do with the fact that they are not working well together. And so the problem that they want you to fix is that, but you also have to have the skills and the knowledge to say, how do I manage a portfolio? And how do I bring these people that can't work together? How do I help them work together and help them understand how to work in this portfolio process?
Right.
Great example. And why not call it what it is then? It's communication coaching, or it's I've worked in the past with organizational psychologists. That's what they call themselves. Now, I think at some point in history, that term was no longer sellable, and they called themselves agile coaches. But they're still making themselves available to the industry as organizational psychologists. Life coaches have done a similar jump in describing themselves, and it's a marketing strategy, and I understand it. But what has it got to do with agile coaching? I still have I want to dig into that question. I think that. Go ahead.
Let me attempt to frame it, right? So let me attempt to frame it, because I think of it as simply whatever is an impediment to business success is a blocker.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that blocker is technical, whether the blocker is personal. So maybe a manager is too above themselves and must above the team, and therefore won't communicate, or too in the weeds because he fears that if the team does not succeed, his bonus goes out the window.
And those problems are long-standing, and people used to call themselves management consultants, and they would solve those problems. What does that have to do with agile coaching?
So, David, if I can maybe reset a little bit further, you made a comment early on that, hey, this term has been hijacked. I actually share that notion, because if you look back, you go back to the book, Agile Coaching, it was put out by Pragmatic Publishers, right? That kind of predates a lot of the other things that happened before that kind of evolved into what we're talking about. So we want to, make Agile great again. Don't look at that too hard. It looks a lot like MAGA. But yeah, make Agile great again. Why don't we go back and make Agile coaching be what it was in the beginning, which was very technically centric. Like if you go back and you look at the resume and the experience, the technical experience of the people who wrote that initial book, these aren't people that had ICF certifications. They never got them. They were Agile coaches. That's where this started, right?
We uncover better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others to do it.
Yep, absolutely.
So can I offer a counterpoint then? Sorry.
What if, just real quick, what if one of the things they uncovered was that a professional coaching skill was something that they needed? So that's
well, then go get an expert or develop that expertise, and then offer that to the organization or to the client, but be clear that you're offering a new service, a different kind of service.
So I guess this is where I start to get a little bit worried that we then throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? And so part of this, my natural need to be a contrarian, so I apologize, but I think the reason we're having this conversation right now is because we're seeing the problem of too many, let's say, non-practicing coaches in the industry. When I started, the first coaches that I worked with were ex-engineers that were far too hands-on and far too directive, and that was the problem that I was seeing. And I think we've actually, the pendulum swung in the other direction, at least from my perspective. And I think to Chris's point, the idea of like going back to how it was, the risk there is we have taken a bunch of steps. I'm visualizing a web in my head, and we've been taking all these steps, and where we want to be is up here, and we kind of go side to side and we zigzag as we go in the direction we want to go. At the moment, we've veered off over here and we don't want to be over here. That doesn't mean that we want to go back down to where we were. It means we need to shift over here and find that correct balance. And for me, the balance to just go back to David's point is there is definitely some value in a generalized term that covers multiple different kinds of roles or different kinds of skill sets, let's say, that sees itself as a community that can share and that can learn from each other and can grow together. And I don't think going too far down the element of just really narrowly defining it and being very exclusive helps, nor does going so broad that any person with a life coaching workshop under their belt can be in it, right? I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. And I think we are too far in that direction, but I don't think we go too far in the other direction either.
To be clear, I wasn't trying to suggest or devalue anything that's there, right? Like I'm not saying reset the whole time scale, although that'd be interesting if, as far as the balance goes, where it's about value. It's not about regressing and going backwards. It's about re-examining our values. And exactly like you said, I think Dave Snowden's term is rewilding, right? We're not trying to reverse. We're trying to rewild ourselves. We're trying to understand what are the needs currently. Are we meeting those needs? What are the next? It's that anticipatory vision. What's next? What do we need to be to position ourselves for success, all of ourselves, collectively? And is the ICF, definitely won't get us there. ICF ticket is that, if we continue going down that path, when does it become a waste? And will that serve the Agile community as a whole better going forward? That's the questions that I'm hoping to get an answer to.
Yeah. So let me jump in here. What I see here is sort of like there's a liminality going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's not either or, it's yes and, right? And to what degree depends on context. It depends, our favorite statement. right? The other side is I will kind of push back against like, hey, this is not our job, because if we start to talk about systems coaching, we're coaching a system. Yes, we are a coaching system. We're coaching something called an organization, right? And in it, you have, as I like to quote John Vervaeke, there is a agent working in an arena, right? You have two ways you can coach. You either coach, I consider the arena to be the structures and how the processes of how the game is structured and played, and the player, meaning the agent. The agent affects the arena turns around, affects the agent. Transform the arena, arena might transform the agent, and you get this virtuous loop, hopefully, right? So when I look at this in this dimension, professional coaching is needed to some degree, because that addresses the agent. The Agile coaching side coaches the arena, right? So now there is to me, then the system is complete, right? But the problem is the liminality of like, how much do I need of this ingredient for the success of this cook? And am I the right chef? Maybe I specialize in Asian food, but I'm not great at like Italian.
And how does that over specialization that we seem to find ourselves in, how does that serve that? Like, I'm very much a generalist. I don't like to be put into a cube. You know, I'm kind of a neo-generalist. That's how I identify myself. But, you know, we don't like to be put into cubes. We want to be understood, but not so much that people see us typecast as one certain thing. And I think that's what's happened. Like, Agile coaching means something very, very specific now. And maybe we need to sprinkle in a little bit more variety there. I don't know.
Well, what does it mean specifically?
Yeah, what does it mean?
I'd love to know that.
Well,
so I hate to tell you guys.
Yeah, let me explain. That's a good clarification.
Finish and I'll follow. Yeah.
So what I mean by that is, if you look at the typical career progression that's available to us, that goes pretty much one track. You need this certificate and that certificate and the other certificate. What I'm saying is that really serve the community? Did that deviation from the original premise? You know, the whole premise there was, oh, we need more Agile coaches. Well, what kind of Agile coaches? Where is the value center? Is the value center really over here on the right where we think it is, or is it a little bit more technical than what we're suggesting now? Perhaps.
Okay. Can I? Because I want to.
Go ahead, Dave.
So in the comments here, I've been accused of not. Somebody said I'm missing the point. Tell me, what point is it that I'm missing?
I think it's sort of like, to me, I don't think you're missing any points. We're pointing out that there's a superset and a subset.
And I'm challenging the point that if the definition of Agile coach is so nondescript that it's everything, well, then it's also nothing.
Right.
And it's my opinion.
Right.
It's my opinion that Agile coaching, we all may be better served if we go back to the document and say, if you're an Agile coach, then you are one who uncovers better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others to do it. Right. Period. Everything else is something else. So be a professional coach, be an organizational psychologist, be all those other things.
So I think the issue that brings, though, is that you are potentially what's the word I'm looking for? Overemphasizing or being too certain that we would agree even on that definition, which is to say, we're talking about very imprecise terms, even in that attempt to nail things down, which is to say, well, the way that you might uncover better ways of delivering software might well be by dealing with people issues or organizational leadership or culture, right? Those things are inherently tied in. And I think the very expectation that we could nail down a single agreement to something like this that everyone's going to be on board with, that's just the illusion of certainty. I think
fair comment.
You're absolutely and so just to say, though, I do think that you are absolutely right that the boundary is too far outside, right? So it does need to come in to a degree, but it comes back to my comment earlier about healthy tension, right? I think what we need is some disagreement about what this means, but mostly agreement. And it's in the boundary between those two where we're going to start finding all the really good and interesting stuff. Mm-hmm. And when that boundary is too wide, which is where we are now, we get pulled down into all these silly semantic arguments that don't really add anything. And so I think, I guess what I'm saying is I both agree with what you're saying, but also potentially disagree with what you're probably doing for the sake of argument, which is maybe taking it to an extreme. I think the answer is somewhere in the middle of those two things.
Mm-hmm.
And also,
we're going to say David gets the award for landing on the original hashtag. No such thing as an Agile coach, right? Because the skill sets are so broad. What the hell is this, right? And I think it goes back to like how do we define this fuzziness, so to speak?
Well, and this is an important problem,
right?
Because if a company feels that they have some dysfunction and they need help, they don't have the help inside the company. Maybe they appreciate having an external perspective, like an outrigger on a vessel, and they want to look for someone with some expertise that can help them, and they go out to the marketplace and they're looking at the words Agile coach, but they have no idea what it means. This is a problem in the world of work right now.
Yeah. So I always say that I can expose it. Well, Mark first, and then I'll go.
Okay. So what I find, just something I find very interesting in what you're saying, David, and what you're saying, Michael, because I think when we say Agile with a capital A, you can say that it doesn't mean anything whatsoever. If you only say Agile with a capital A, what the hell does that mean? Nothing. Because it's a single word. It means something different to all of us. So I agree with you, Michael, that you cannot capture something in a sentence. It's just too abstract. That's impossible. While I also agree with what you're saying, David, definitely that if it's everything, it's nothing. I mean, that is also very, very odd.
Well, I've started to introduce myself as an Agile engineering coach, for example. I've abandoned the other term because I think it's unclear.
So let me propose something. So this is what I've been sensing to, and now I think where I particularly feel that there needs to be the definition of what a high bar is, and then possibly high bar that does include everything, that includes Agile engineering, that includes everything. But we don't have to necessarily say we've mastered every single bit. We just, in some places, I would say most people need to know how much they need to know to be dangerous in most places, most situations, and then know how to call in for reinforcements when they're beyond their skill level, right? So rather than say, this is my criticism of something like a growth wheel, because the growth wheel is something that I assess myself that I step into. No, we want to say, look, here's the high bar. Here's the wide range that nobody will ever master because it's impossible to master, right? And then there needs to be something in which we say there's a sort of pattern language, to borrow that Christopher Alexander concept, right? That there's a certain kind of like, I think anti-patterns have gone a little bit like has turned into its own Frankenstein, but we need something in which, maybe playbook's the wrong thing to call it, but something in which, hey, in these situations, you want these skills. How would you apply it? How many times have people, going back to what I said in my original opening statement, to say, hey, we've tried this we're evidence-based. This works. This domain works in this particular context. Does it match yours? Right? The situation you're coaching. Here's mostly, hey, you're in this realm. We need some sort of map to assess our clients in a way,
a
right?
pattern library.
And their dysfunctions, for instance.
Yeah,
right?
well, so the reason I want to jump in is because I think this is what I'm trying to do with dysfunction mapping. But I think the part that where you've jumped a step ahead of where I think we're actually ready as an industry, which is to say, 9 times out of 10, when someone says we know this works because we've seen it elsewhere, and then you say, okay, prove it, the answer is basically trust me, bro. Right? Like we often don't actually get given anything solid to back that up.
And there's an inherent survivorship bias underneath that. And we as an industry need to be honest with ourselves. We also need to say, here's where the attempts were tried and they failed.
Yeah.
And this is why they failed.
And so for me, I guess that's the reason I mention it, is because I think that's, again, I don't want to just keep plugging my own stuff, but the thing that I'm trying to do this function mapping is give people the tool to run the experiments, capture the data, and show whether something was successful or not. And I think that if we start, whether it's my tool or something else, if we start expecting that as a requirement to demonstrate yourself as a competent coach or whatever term we're using, which is to say, if you want me to believe that you know what you're doing, you have some evidence to back that up, well, then after some period of time of our industry expecting that, then we start to have more reliable, say, pattern libraries. Because I think that's the problem right now, is a lot of the patterns and anti-patterns that we talk about, we probably all know anecdotally to be true, but it's very, very hard to demonstrate it. And that's the bit that we need to start just hammering.
And the multipolar problem around commodification that gets in the way with that pattern library, right? Because everybody's trying to sell and get their own nut, so to speak, right? So that's for another day, right, Ryan?
Yeah.
You know, but
one quick thing.
Yeah,
Dan,
yeah. I'm trying to think what part 3 will be.
Yeah.
I'm leaning towards, again, with all this wonderful discussions, that describe what the hell we're talking about without using the words agile or coach. So think about that.
Yes, that would be a fantastic exercise, and I think very clarifying.
David, one thing that I had a question for you on it. So, I gave my example and you said, well, call yourself something different. And when we start talking about patterns, I see that you're going to constantly run into patterns where, in fact, I've had conversations with executives where I say, I posit without any data that at least 30% of your time is wasted because of people, because of infighting, or the meeting after the meeting, or the gossip mill, or whatever the things are. They're not doing productive work because of that. And they say yes. And I'm like, well, I can help with that. They said, well, but that's a hard cost. And that's a hard cost to fix a soft thing. I don't want to spend the money. And so there's that. I want to pause on that and go back to, so when you talk about you sell it as something else, the pattern, I'm always going to run into these patterns of, I want you to install this thing. And I can't installing the thing isn't going to work because of the people issues. And so that's a repeated pattern. So do I just say, oh no, I'm a product expert, I know how to do portfolios. If you want to solve that problem, you need me, an expensive person, plus this other expensive person who calls himself a coach, and we together are going to solve the problem? Or do I build the skill set to do that thing and say, I can help you holistically with, you have a problem, you have a business problem, I'm going to help you solve it?
And what's the question for me?
Well, because your question was, call it something else and sell it as something else. I'm saying, so if I say that's an agile coach or a product coach, I more do product stuff because that's my background. I did some development. So why can't I call myself a product coach or an agile coach and say, I solve the problem holistically? You seem to have a problem with that terminology, and you're saying, well, but call yourself something different because you're doing this coachy stuff.
Right. So why not call yourself something different?
Well, because the reason that they want me is because I understand how to do the portfolio management stuff. But I also understand that what's getting in the way of them doing that has nothing to do with that. It's this other, they go together. And the pattern is that they will always go together. Right. And so I always just need to pair with a person who does this, or, yeah.
Like if you have those capabilities, advertise those and hyphenate them or something. Like, and by the way, I'm just trying to challenge the point, because if the phrase agile coach is so misunderstood, then maybe it does require some clarification, some borders, right? If the scope is everything, then I've made the point already. But back to your question, I would say, if you have those capabilities, offer them. Great, why not? But maybe part of the work you're doing isn't agile coaching, it's some other kind of coaching, or it's some other kind of consultancy, and name it. Like I'm being accused in the comments of being like, why be so pedantic? Well, because that's the conversation we're having. We're having this conversation because no one understands this term.
I agree. I don't think you're being overly pedantic, or I don't think you're missing anything. So I don't agree with those comments that's you. I'm wondering what in your mind, so you're saying do this, but what I'm saying is, if I find that 100% of the time when I'm asked to do some product-y type thing or some agile type thing, it's paired with those other things, then don't I need that skill to resolve them? Because I can't do what I'm being paid to do unless I understand how to resolve them. It's
Agile and Organizational Coaching by Dan Moody.
Is
Yeah,
it your position that would make things less confusing for people, though?
I don't know. It's worth an experiment.
Chris, you wanted to
there's a
hop in there,
certain-
and Hui needs to head out. in a
Yeah,
moment.
so there's a certain discriminate. I think that what David is arguing for is valid. There's a certain discrimination needed in a way that describes the value each of us contributes based on our skills.
I would use the word discernment.
Right,
but-
discernment, right? Or yeah, I use them interchangeably. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right, but yeah, there's a discernment, and then going back to the beginning, it's sort of like even if you do call yourself X, it has to be clear what the value you provide and the arena you operate in. Like we all in agreement, we must be forthcoming with our clients to say, look, I can offer this. Is this what you want? Do you want to make that part of your working agreement with us?
So I may be late to the party, but I just want to say we all need to be life coaches.
Why?
And why do you feel that way, David?
Is that tongue in cheek, David?
That's
To
great.
coach ourselves. That's why we need to be life
while I
coaches.
was away.
David,
I
while
better
you're
put
out,
those in there.
I volleyed the shot that nobody took tonight. Said that coaches need life coaching more than life coaching needs them. You know,
Yeah.
So
or maybe I have that reversed.
I want to put something out there. I mean, we before we had Erica here, she said that if you have to treat anyone, give them therapy, it would be unethical if you don't have the skill set and the training, and you actually have a specific
illegal.
education.
And
I'm
illegal.
sorry, illegal, illegal and unethical. Illegal also, yes. So Agile coach is not a protected title. You have titles which are protected, like medical doctor and whatnot. That we don't have. That's just that's a
We
fact.
can
And let's
take
not
that
make
to
it.
another debate because there's this thing labeled now called trauma-informed, trauma-sensitive coaching. You can go and take somatic experiencing and deal with trauma without being a clinician now. So
My point is
the
just,
waters
my
are,
point is
are
just that it's
muddy.
that the title or whatever we want to call it, Agile coaching, is not a protected
No, it's
thing.
not.
So
I agree with
anybody
you.
can just
Yeah, I
call
agree with you.
themselves that.
Yeah,
Well,
and I would argue that if you're doing trauma work in the organization, that too is a separate line of offering.
Did you say trauma work?
Yeah, trauma work.
So I think trauma
Chris,
work.
Chris, come on in.
Therapy. Like I think you, to Erica's point, when you're
for
talking about
another
past
day. For another day.
therapy, you gotta not. That is not coaching. Anyway, sorry.
No, I was going to mention, we were talking about basically personal branding. I think, David, that's kind of that was your focus. It's more on personal branding, what we call ourselves. But in reality, there is this umbrella term, Agile coach, that most companies use. And that can range from everything from a project manager, you've seen it, and I've seen it too, all the way to what we're talking about here of somebody that's doing organizational change, which is great, or whatever. Like this, it's just so broad. And I don't know if we can do anything about it other than to be aware and acknowledge it. But I do think, like, the focus, where does the focus land? Again, going back to that question of that balance between technical and the other. So I don't know where it lands. I'm really hoping that conversation continues on LinkedIn. We've probably run out of steam here. But I'm really looking forward to reading the comments. I've not been able to keep up with them. So.
Ryan, I think that's for the next conversation, is to kind of reiterate, kind of reinterpret what you just said, Chris, is what is the core value prop of an Agile coach? What is the essential value proposition? Everything else is value add.
Mm-hmm.
Why hire an Agile coach?
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, I would, yes, and I would say that it's a meaningless question without what is the benefit of Agile in quantifiable terms?
Yes.
That's definitely part of that question. That's probably the first thing we need to answer, Damon. Absolutely.
I thought the reason you hired Agile coaches was to beat people into doing stand-ups.
You need to shield between the Scrum Masters and the manager. Right?
Well, so I've proposed a few times in this conversation what an Agile coach might be, and that is someone who uncovers better ways to develop software by doing it and helping others to do it. It seems that is that not sufficient somehow?
No,
Well,
I would-
It's so
What is
huge.
that? That's vague and nebulous. What is that?
Better ways is super nebulous.
So David, the whole when you throw that out there to the world, the first
Yeah.
thing that'll come back and hit you in the face is, well, Agile is more than just software. That'll be the.
Is it though? Maybe
Well-
that's the why. And again, I'm being a bit
No,
devil's advocate here,
you're good.
but people have read that document from 2001 and then appropriated it in other contexts.
For sure.
And I can appreciate that they've done that, and I've done it. We've
Yeah.
all done it. But what if we were to be a little more disciplined about
Yeah.
if that, maybe leave that document in the past and everyone stop using the word agile to mean everything, and
Yeah.
we might be better served.
Yeah.
Well, now we get into, I think, marketing, salesmanship, Agile as an industry.
Right.
How do we get our gig?
Well, clearly that's why it means so many
it's-
things right now, because it was a successful
That's the
word. The word was coined. It led
Agile
to
no more. Oh.
that's the hairy mess here, because we got to eat.
Yeah. Well, we want to eat, but we also want to do good, right?
Yeah.
So it's not,
It's
well,
not
I don't know.
mutually exclusive.
I can't speak. I can't speak for Hui though. I don't know. I think he does.
You can speak on me
Oh,
my
yeah,
behalf
okay.
of that one. Okay.
I think when you say, keep it to software development, I mean, I think just look back at the history of what happened, right? I mean, if you tried to do that, you end up basically in the same place because, right? So I grew up in the day when I wrote 300 or 400 page documents and said, here's what I want. And then developers went off and did it, with me working with them as they did it. And when you're in that frame, I can let legal spend 5 weeks looking at something to give me an answer. If I'm developing something that I plan to release in a day or two, legal can't spend 5 weeks doing it anymore. So now I need legal to change how they operate. Oh, and HR needs to change how they operate too. Oh, and by the way, managers have to change. So we ultimately get to everything. If you're going to operate that way in how you build software, how the organization sells has to change. How you
so I'm going to call myself an
Yeah.
agile coach or agile engineering coach and bureaucracy disassembler.
That'll
That's
sell.
awesome. Yeah. I love that.
Where's
Roll
my
it right off
wallet?
the tongue.
Where did I put my wallet?
See, but that's how you get into all these other areas, and that's why we're talking about agile
That's
HR
right.
and agile this and
So-
agile that. We're like, it's business agility. It applies to it eats the world.
That's the problem. As soon as you start to think that you're working systemically, now you realize that everything is interdependent and everything is connected to itself.
I hear a couple of interesting topics in here. One is agile marketing or marketing to eat or something like that. Because really, I don't know that agile has it's like it just doesn't have the cachet it used to. Everybody needs it. Few people are doing it well. We need it. But the cachet of the term, I think, is.
It's watered. We all agree. I think it's gotten watered down.
The other thing, though, is that whole software development thing. So I think they accidentally made a very human document. Like, there's what does give people the environment and support they need, and trust them to get the work done. What does that have to do with software? It's totally independent of software. It's more of a human thing. I think the whole idea of like how do we carry this forward? Like there was the anti-slavery days, and then there were the MLK days, and then I'll just stop there. But like that whole movement keeps evolving. What are we just going to keep having the same message?
So, Ryan, you want to come back in here and maybe?
Did he leave us?
What is?
Are you
what is-
wanting? Oh my gosh! Look at me like this. Do
Angela's
you want to
gonna
land?
eat.
You want to land this ship?
Yeah.
I think we're the meme generator now.
Let's play the head out.
Yeah, play the head out, the closing circle, if you will. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for those who are watching, for listening. For those who were here, we wish to honor their presence and hope that they will join us again in the future. As we do in the open space technology domain, let's go with the closing circle for whatever you wish to say at this point. In the top left of the screen, that would be Dan.
Hey, I appreciated the conversation. It was interesting to me to participate in. I appreciate everybody, David. I really appreciated your ability to stick there with a point and add some.
I'm just stubborn.
Yeah, well, there you go. So add some contention, because we were all agree and lovey and dovey and at the beginning, and you were like, no, this, and you were stubborn. It was good. It made for good conversation.
All right, Dan.
But I
passing
really
the
am that
talking
way.
Stick to David. Dan passing the talking stick to David, and we shall receive
Sure.
what David is going to head here. So.
Well, I really appreciate being able to meet Christopher and Mark, Hui and Dan for the first time. Damon, it's nice to see you again. And for some of the people in the comments, like, I wish that you were in the conversation as well. Yeah. I've enjoyed this, and Ryan, thanks for setting it up.
Mark?
Yes, thank you to everyone. I thought this was interesting. I want to just pick on a few points, David. That what you're saying. I mean, I think we can all agree. I think that we, at least historically speaking, will say that the thing with Agile stems from software development, so that document you referred to and so forth. But I don't think it makes sense to only focus on that, because we also talked about profit, or probably multiple types of outcomes for organizations. And I think the bigger systems thinking picture is actually really important. Why do organizations even exist? It is to make a profit for some, but it's also for other reasons, I would say. So it's not only to make a profit. People also need to flourish while working. So there's probably multiple outcomes, not just making a profit. Even though I think that's probably one of them, but not the only one.
Thank you, Mark. I'm picking up the stick and passing it to Hui.
So thank you all for joining us in this conversation that I started with Marcelo. And I'm sorry he's not able to make this, because I'm sure it would be more fun, right? And I first of all, I would like to say I feel seen, right? Everybody, I think we're all on the same footing here for pretty much, even when we're in disagreement. And what's needed here is these critical conversations about how do we move not just our industry, but us individually, and how do we move business forward in a way that is beneficial for everyone. I mean, obviously, but let's be clear about what we do, and really excited about future conversations, future dialectic around this, about what is it that we really do, what is it we provide, and help people really narrow down to help all of us, because really, it's a group brand too. It's an industry brand. If somebody fails at a transformation, it affects all of us indirectly, right? So I would say to be continued, and hope to see you back for more.
Fantastic. And we'll go across the screen to Damon and Chris, and then I'll take the head out.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation. And looking forward to a future conversation with this group. And I think, the whole, for me, my messaging that I'm experimenting with is people and profits with an F. That those are really the two most important things that I get out of Agile. Actually, happier people leads to higher profits. And it's really hard to survive as a company without profits. Pretty soon you'll have unhappy people. So for me, that's kind of the focus, and I've heard a lot of that. One other thought is there was talk of personal branding, and that's cool. I was thinking about that, and then I thought, well, wait a minute. If I go out with just this one message as a lone wolf, that could be interesting. But it's good to have validation of a bunch of people are thinking, hey, this is a direction to go in, and I want some of that. So I would be very interested in the conversation. I remember going to Agile and Beyond, and one of the keynotes said, before you try to go beyond, maybe you should try Agile. But, I don't think that applies so much anymore. I think we need to figure out, how are we going to talk about this going forward?
Chris. So I'll go. Yeah, this is the only second jam. I did my first jam with you, Ryan, a couple weeks ago, but I really appreciate everybody making this a very, very fun conversation, and hopefully the audience got something out of it as well. To me, Agile is contextualized balance, so I'll always try to focus on, are we in balance or out of balance? Can we be in a better balance to go further, faster, in a better way, in a smoother way? So this has been a great conversation. So many great topics and all kinds of things we can talk about in the future, hopefully. So thank you again, guys.
Fantastic. Well, put the music on here from hopefully our AI board. Thank you all. And wish all of you out there good now, good tomorrow. Be more purple, and thank you for the precious gift of your time and